Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ presented by Geico. Last week, Jamie Eisenberg's Week 1 headline read, Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins will come out blazing in L.A. And Jamie's start of the week ended up with 33.1 fantasy points by throwing for 466 yards, 3 touchdowns. It was certainly an interesting week from the quarterback perspective. You might see on this list some surprises like Baker Mayfield, even Russell Wilson cracking the top 12. Then you had some others like Lamar Jackson, Daniel Jones, single digit depending on your format. Those guys who are expected to come away with big points, Joe Burrow and Levis. It's going to be interesting to see how it flips this week and some of those big names can bounce back. All right, so let's get to Jamie's start of the week. And this week's headline reads, Jared Goff getting his due. Lions hosting the Seahawks. JG has a streak going into this weekend's game. Take the Lions quarterback's interception-free streak, for example. Right now sitting at 359. That's the third longest streak in terms of attempts in NFL history, only behind Tom Brady's 399 and Aaron Rodgers' 402. What a win they had at Arrowhead against the champs. 96% rostered in terms of your PPR leagues, and half of them starting. You see what our fantasy analysts think of Jared Goff versus what Sportsline. Very bullish on Jared Goff this week against the Seahawks. All right, on set here with the aforementioned Jamie Eisenberg and Dave Richard. Time for that easy choice presented by Geico. So you're 1 for 1, Jamie, here. What are the chances you're feeling pretty good about going 2 for 2?
I feel good, you know, and Sportsline is the home of our projections. Detroit is the home of Jared Goff, and Jared Goff loves playing at home, Tommy.
Those splits are amazing.
He was absolutely on fire last year, over 26 fantasy points per game at home, and one of those games was a huge Week 4 performance against the Seahawks when he went for 41 fantasy points. And so, you know, we saw Seattle last week, some of the same deficiencies. They allowed 300 passing yards to Matthew Stafford. If he had not maybe handed off a few of those to Kieran Williams and Cam Akers, maybe he gets a couple touchdowns, and we're looking at a better fantasy day for him. But the thing that was missing for Goff last week was that second touchdown. He had the one to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think Sam Laporta is going to show up this week. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to show up this week. And Josh Reynolds will help support Amon-Ra St. Brown in the passing game. So I think he's got top 10 upside, just again, playing at home in a game that I think will allow them to sort of further that statement that we saw last week, that they are a legit team, and he is a legit reason why he's going to have another big outing.
What is Jared Goff's kryptonite? Just in general. It's a lot of quarterbacks' kryptonite.
The road?
Pass rush. Hates pass rush. What's the Seahawks' defense kryptonite? A good offensive line. Jared Goff plays behind one of the best offensive lines in football. I agree. He should go off for a very good game. Get you the 2 touchdowns that he didn't get you in Week 1.
Okay, so we're both bullish on Jared Goff. And Jamie, let's continue your starts for this week now. Daniel Jones was someone that I brought up because there were a lot of people on Sunday Night Football hoping for just even an average game from Daniel Jones. It didn't work out that way in a 40-0 loss. So why are you bullish on DJ coming back this week?
Well, they mentioned pass rush. That pass rush was on him last week, and it's not going to be the same thing this week. The Cardinals' defense is clearly not the same level of the Cowboys. The nice thing, the only nice thing that Daniel Jones did, he's one of 5 quarterbacks to run for at least 40 yards last week, so the rushing is still there for him. But clearly the passing has to improve and the blocking has to improve up front. I think he will perform much better. Is he going to have a 25-plus point game? I'm not sure, but still be in the range of a low-end number 1 starter, certainly somebody you can go back to in 2 quarterback and super flex leagues. Again, it was embarrassing, but things will improve. The hope is really not just for this week, but the rest of the season. How bad is this hamstring injury for Darren Waller? And so the fact that it's a nerve issue, you got to keep an eye on it right now. He says that he can't open up and be the same type of player that he's used to being. So if he doesn't have him, then I think it's going to be a little bit worrisome. But as of now, Waller expected to play, and hopefully we'll get that production from the passing improving to join the rushing, but really just block him, get blocking up front for him, because 7 sacks was pretty ugly.
Saw a couple Bills on that list. Let's focus on Gabe Davis.
So this is really nothing statistically that you could say, okay, Gabe Davis at home, Gabe Davis versus the Raiders. It's just really more about Josh Allen needs to make a statement. And Stephon Diggs is locked and loaded. You know you're going to get great production from him. I think Josh Allen walking out, and you got to be old to remember this. Brian Cox of the Dolphins once walked into, I think it was Orchard Park, double middle fingers at the crowd. I think Josh Allen's doing the same thing, but to all of his doubters. because everybody's saying he stinks right now. The turnovers for the last year plus have been miserable, and they were miserable against the Jets. This is not the same defense, not the same pass rush. He is going to light up this defense, and I think Gabe Davis is going to have one of his big plays. Now, Sean Payton of the Broncos said that they couldn't take some deep shots because the Raiders were just sinking back in the back end of their defense and not allowing Russell Wilson to do that. There's a big difference between Russell Wilson and Josh Allen. Allen will still take those chances, take those shots. And again, Gabe Davis will have a breakout game in week 2.
And then lastly, to just sort of take away from that list, fellow receiver Mike Williams, what's the thought on him?
2 things. Well, first off, we don't know Austin Eckler's status, so if they can't run the ball to the same level, then you're going to put more on Justin Herbert's plate, which is what we'd like to see anyway, along with Austin Eckler being a part of that. But I spoke to Eckler this week, and he said our game plan was to run against the Dolphins, and so you saw that, both between Eckler and Josh Kelly. The thing about Mike Williams that I like, we saw the same problems for this Titans secondary last week. Derek Carr goes for 300 yards. 3 receivers go for 11 PPR points against this defense. Mike Williams left the game briefly last week with a head injury. He's going to play the full game this week. They used him in the slot. I don't know if that's the best place for him, but they're giving him different opportunities to succeed. I think this will be one of those weeks where you're happy to have Mike Williams on your fantasy team.
Again, running backs James Cook and Jamal Williams also on Jamie Eisenberg's Week 2 starts. Dave, let's get to your list here. And it's interesting, there's a theme here in terms of maybe underperforming wide receivers. We saw a lot of that there in Week 1. So let's continue the wide receiver theme with Christian Kirk against the Chiefs.
You looked at what Jacksonville did last week. They wanted to use 2 tight end formations. They wanted to be able to protect Trevor Lawrence. They took advantage of the matchups on the outside against Indianapolis, and I would say that they did. Calvin Ridley had a huge game. Zay Jones had a huge game. They're going to need Christian Kirk against Kansas City. They need to open up the field a little bit more. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball very well. Their offensive line speed up. Chris Jones is back for Kansas City, and I thought the Chiefs front actually looked pretty good against Detroit. So Christian Kirk's going to play a lot more, see more targets. I like him as a high-end flex. Can't call him a top 24 wide receiver, not even in PPR, but I think he does a lot better, obviously, than what he did last week. And then Nico Collins was also on the list. In Houston, he's the #1 wide receiver for the Texans. I know it's a little scary because C.J. Stroud is the quarterback there, but this Colts defense, I just talked about him. They're bad against perimeter wide receivers. That's exactly what Nico Collins is. I think he matches his numbers from Week 1.
Let's stay with that same game. Anthony Richardson, I think a lot of us talked about he's obviously taken season long. Maybe you sit him in Week 1 to find out what you got. He actually did pretty well.
He did.
Yeah, so this week you're saying maybe a chance to put him in right away against Houston.
I think it's an easier matchup for him against the Texans, and you saw what the Ravens offense did in Week 1. Lots of short throws, and that's actually where Anthony Richardson looked good in Week 1. He was as polished as I've ever seen him on those throws 10 yards or closer to the line of scrimmage, and then he didn't run as much as we've seen him run before. So I think he could do a little bit more than that. So the shortcomings that he'll have as a passer can be made up for as a runner, and I think he can put together 2 touchdowns. He was this close to getting 2 touchdowns last week, Tommy, or he did. He was this close to getting 3. This week it'll be at least 2 against the Texans.
And then one more from your list. There was a bit of a theme, underperforming tight ends in Week 1 of fantasy here, but Luke Musgrave is someone we should be talking about for this week.
I actually hated how he looked in Week 1 because he should have had 2 touchdowns, Tommy. He was wide open on one play. Jordan Love overthrew him on the second one. He caught it, and then he fell down 6 yards shy of the end zone against Chicago. Now he's taking on Atlanta. You saw what Hayden Hurst did against that Falcons defense last week. I think Luke Musgrave will be that outlet for Jordan Love inside of 10 yards pretty much all season long with a couple of deep shots on top of it. I like him as a top 12 tight end.